Call to order the regular school board meetings of the Miami Schools. Roll call, please.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Mr. Nay?
Yes.
Mr. Means? Here. Mr. Bryce? Absent. Mr. Siebert?
Present. You all can rise and pledge allegiance. Okay, at this time, we need a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll move.
Mr. Means, Mr. Nay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Nay?
Yes.
Mr. Means? Yes. Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Okay, at this time, we need a motion for the reading of the minutes. Past minutes of October 23rd, 2018, regular meeting. Who was that? Was it Wayne? Mr. Siebert? And second, Mr. Nay. All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Means? Yes. Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Mr. Nay?
Yes.
Okay, at this time, communications and/or visitors to the board.
Thank you. We, just a couple of updates here. First, Mainville Crossing is officially done. There's a punch list. So the construction is actually finished. And projected delivery date on the furniture is January 7th. So things are moving along. We are working to get the internet and fiber hooked up into the building so we can get our network set up down there as well. The other item we have is we've spent some time doing some planning and visioning as a part of our OFCC master planning process. And we have tonight with us Mr. Chuck Warner, who was an architect from a consultant who helped us do that visioning. The visioning and planning group involved grade level representatives from every grade. The teaching side, all of the building administration, some central office administration, and some parent and booster stakeholders. That was 3 days that we spent up at University of Dayton in their IAC facility. And our next steps are going out to do some site visits here December 3rd and 5th. We're actually going to take a bus, Croswell bus, to Eminence, Kentucky to look at a brand new elementary and a brand new high school, which we saw some pictures of as we were looking at new learning spaces when we went through this process. And so Chuck has a presentation. He's going to review the report with you and has some slides. So thanks, Chuck, for coming.
You are welcome.
Thanks for having me. Between Melinda and I, we're going to just cover some of the things that we talked about in our work session. So if you would, okay. I added some other slides and then we'll get into that report. So Melinda's going to take us through this. Just a little bit more, I do a lot of this throughout the United States and Central America, working with school districts to kind of help them see the future and to see what a vision might look like. And so we used some of these slides during our work session together. And I think just a place to start is to talk about how we have progressed from the Little Red Schoolhouse through the Industrial Revolution. In those days we taught just reading, writing, arithmetic. We moved into the Industrial Revolution and just basically put students in a classroom 5 by 5, and we kind of stuck them in one end of the building when they were kindergarten, and we got them out the other end when they were in 12th grade. So how has all that changed? We still have basic things that we're trying to learn, but we're asking ourselves, and the committee talked about this at length, about what are we seeing with students that come in and are ready to start school. And most of you can see the little baby up on the upper left with an iPad there or an iPhone. You probably have examples in your own life where that's happening. So the next slide, we're talking about how about the Apple Ring instead of the Apple Watch? We just don't really know where things are going to go, but we're trying to prepare ourselves so that we can prepare the kids. And let me say this about facilities. We will always want to design a facility so that it always says yes to whatever we want to do with it, however we want to teach in it. Because we're really preparing our students for the future and not for what we did when we went through school. Hey, and we turned out pretty good, okay? So let's remember that. But things are so much different now. So we like to include the kids. We didn't have as many in this session, but I always like to ask the kids, what do they think the schools of the future should look like? So the new school here in Little Miami will have a rocket launcher. It'll have a Baskin-Robbins and an indoor pool and this soccer field and all those fun things. The idea, of course, is to just let our minds go free for a while, and that's what we did for a couple of days. So what we know is that school is not really about this anymore, setting kids in 5x5 rows, but it's like these slides. It's fun. It's about creativity. Now, how about that? That's a simple thing to add to the playground, and yet look at the learning that's going on. Places to read, places to occupy. Applications lab. There's a lot of discussion about making a room ready for anything, using outdoor spaces, roofscapes. We've been talking about the 21st century learning and all of the skills that go with that. Well, I added this at the last. It's really the 22nd now that we're looking for. But what's important here about this is these were developed before we got to the 21st century as just kind of a general things that will affect education. What's most important is we spent time together asking what's best for Little Miami. How do we do that for our kids? Lots of research now on brain activity, how it works, creativity, left brain, right brain. We did a couple of fun activities together. Here's the model of the old school, the old industrial model where it just flows along the corridor. And now a lot of schools are designed much like this one here with ELAs and small group rooms, large group rooms, libraries, lots of collaboration moving around. So I think there's some slides here that just show some different areas. Well, we talked about the flipped classroom where kids are doing so much more study, maybe at home or in other locations, and then coming to school. So how to use common areas like corridors for instruction. Work areas, maker spaces, commons areas for just hanging out. This got quite a little shot here, a rock wall in your climbing wall in school, but it's been done. Again, applications, trying to get the room to just say yes to everything. And I kind of put this as the last slide here for this, because it's really about us as we go through this process. We need to be brave. We need to encourage collaboration. And how can we share a 21st century vision together so that we can bring about a successful student. And I'm really excited to have sat with the folks, and you're going to see now in this report the results of that. We had a lot of fun, I thought, and it didn't take a lot to get people talking, to get ideas shared. And so, Melinda, let's move to that report. And I was looking through this report, and I'm smiling because it's a lot of nuts and bolts and stuff like that, but we had a lot of fun too, and laughed and enjoyed our time together. So this is a culmination of all of the work that we did. On the next page, just some introductory comments. And I think most of you know, but for those who don't, this is a school that's going to be built in partnership with the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission. And that was formed, actually the Ohio School Facilities Commission was formed back in 1997 as a result of a lawsuit that was filed by 500 school districts stating that school construction was unconstitutional, funding of school construction was unconstitutional, and the legislature needed to fix that. So they put in place funding, and of course the tobacco money came, and they established the Ohio School Facilities Commission. Now in 1997, there were no standards for school construction. So I wrote most of those standards with some other architects, another planner, and that's what forms the Ohio School Design Manual, OSDM, you'll hear that. And of course, Christy, your architect, and John, they will use that manual as they go through and design and program all of these additions and new work, okay? So what's important here then is to get a bunch of folks together to talk about visioning, to talk about the things that are set, the givens, the things where we have flexible, and that this page lists all those. All right, so our process, and I think it's important, what is an educational vision? And basically, it's a description of how we want to teach in the future, how we want to deliver curriculum, what's important to our students, what separates us from all the other school districts, okay? And so this is just an explanation. And maybe, go back just 1 minute, Melinda. What we did is we talked a lot about paradigm shifts in education, so you saw some of those slides. And the last question, which I like to really ask people, and that is, what would it look like if we really meant it? And what I mean by that, of course, is it's one thing to talk about collaboration, but what does that really look like in reality and in a facility? So we talked a lot about how we can incorporate that in the work that Christy's going to do and your other architect. So, okay. We asked the people to respond first to what they expected, what their outcomes were, and we talked about having a vision and a mission, and then kind of the structure of that, so you can see some of the ideas here. On the next page, kind of looking over your shoulder here. Yeah. On the next page, what we did is we talked about 3 questions. We had folks divide up in groups, and I asked, where have we been, where are we now, and where do we want to go? So we asked the groups to respond, what if we go back? Yeah. Where have we been? So there was a good discussion. It helped me a lot to understand about 3 independent district communities, talking about diversity, time, physical emergency, all those things that you guys have been through. It kind of forms who you are. So on the next slide then, we said, where are we now? Well, we're moving in a good direction. We're growing, lots of diversity now, raising achievement. All right, and then the next slide then gives us some idea of where we want to go. Where would we like to go? More flexible classroom space, meeting the needs of our special kids, our gifted, our ESL students. And of course, retaining this community unity and the ideals of the community. How do we do that? Well, now wait a minute, Chuck, I thought we were building a building. Okay? Well, we are. But, I often say to districts, from this point on, nothing will be the same because you're going to have new facilities and new excitement and kids are going to come. And there's lots of studies about how achievement can increase. And kids are happier to come to school. So it's a very good thing. Okay, Melinda, I'm taking too much time. So then we did strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so on these next 4 pages, you can see our strengths are in our community, and we're fiscally conservative now, growing positive community relationships. Some of our weaknesses would be just the fact that we're almost 100 square miles, funding, and time. Okay? Opportunities would be creating consistency across the schools, equity, and a whole discussion came out on rebranding and saying how much pride we have about being here in Little Miami. Okay? Threats, of course, unchecked growth, some history things there. We tried not to focus on the negatives, but to just we need to get them out there, and how can we resolve them? Okay. So then I showed a video that was done on shifting paradigms, and we kind of responded to that video. And people basically said, that video talks a lot about divergent thinking and how we've gone from standardized testing, and we want to encourage divergent thinking because there may be other answers to the question that just doesn't come from the teacher, and encouraging the students. So we had some good feedback on that, and if you're interested, I would be happy to give you the link to that video. It's very good. It's 11 or 12 minutes long, but it's good. So then we said, all right, if we're trying to define 21st century learning skills and 21st century facilities, well, where are we right now? So this was a little bit tricky because people would say, well, do you mean as a district, or do you mean as a group of teachers? And so what we tried to do was to respond to this as a district and think of this as a continuum. And I like to use from the Flintstones to the Jetsons. That's the easiest thing because we all grew up with that. So where are we from traditional methods to 21st century skills, 21st century teaching? And so the teachers or the respondents all answered, and you can see the little blue star is there to kind of give us an average of both of those. Okay, so after working so hard then, we needed a little break. And so there's this little team building thing called the Marshmallow Challenge. And the challenge is basically in a group to build a structure that will hold a marshmallow the highest. And whoever's structure is the highest wins. Okay? Lots of discussion. Some people saying, well, they're not listening to me on my team. And of course, that's part of the whole fun of it. And then I think, didn't somebody yeah, you guys won. That's right. It stayed up the longest. It stayed up for, an hour? Yeah, that was awesome. Somebody got on a table and tied it to the ceiling. Okay, so it was just a little fun thing to do. All right, back to work now. So we did another group of slides, much like I showed you there, to talk about trends in education. And as I mentioned, I do this all over the country with school districts, and it's really exciting to see how things are changing. We still have the traditions, we still have the same issues with educating students, but really there's a lot more excitement, and it might be fun for us to go back to middle school and high school. But so we got some responses from that discussion on the slides. Okay, so then one of the principal parts, I guess you could say, are these guiding principles. In other words, what are the main themes that are going to come out of this that will help guide our architects, and such as collaboration or diversity or global awareness. And these are a little bit hard to get a hold of sometimes because they're just big picture things. So what happened, which it has not happened to me this way before, is as we were talking about this, Greg said, you know what, we really need to look at the mission statement. Now, I've done that before, but the mission statement really wasn't current, or it could be improved upon. So we set about focusing on the mission statement, and that's what these next couple of pages, let me see, Melinda, I think, yeah, these are the guiding principles that we came up with. So remember, there was a lot of discussion, and then a lot of things got up on the board, and what we came up with was to bring the community together, meeting the needs of all students, equity and equality, fiscal responsibility, collaboration, okay? All right, so then what happened was we reviewed the existing mission statement, and we set about getting a new mission statement. And I used the example of Bill Gates. He has a mission statement, or used to, that were 4 words, and it was information available to everyone. So anything we did, or they did it fit under that mission statement? So here we came up with it: engage, educate, empower. So then, of course, we needed to develop some things under that, because it would be to engage the students, the staff, and the community in each of these areas. So I got to tell you, if you could hear it in my voice, I was kind of excited about this, because now we're taking a much different approach. We're a higher level approach that in essence is going to affect everything in the district, not just facilities. Okay, so let's show something. We talked about how mission statements and visioning go together as roadmaps. And I'm from Oklahoma, so nobody really got the roadmap from Ohio to Oklahoma. But the point is that a roadmap gets us from here to there, gives us direction. It brings marital discord, is what one of the people said. And so we said, all right, well, let's develop this roadmap. So you can see in the next few pages how we developed each of those areas of engaging students, engaging staff. I'm not going to go through all that, so let's, Linda, how about if we, okay, and empower. Okay, so what page are we on, just so we can make 24. Okay, just so everybody can catch up. At this point, Christy, and you all know Christy, she gave us an does everybody know her? Okay. All right. So Christy gave us an overview of the timeline for all of the projects, which is really important, so that everybody understood what's going to happen and when. And she has much more detail. We just kind of dropped a few little images in to make that point. All right, so now back to the question, okay? What would it look like if we really meant it? And so we're trying, you can see that we started with a big wide umbrella, and we just keep kind of focusing down and down like a funnel, an upside down funnel. All right, so here are some givens. These are the things that the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission will do or not do. Okay, next page. Here's, okay, so then we set everybody free, and Melinda will go ahead and everybody got into groups, and then we asked them to just use, colored blocks and to design and lay out in an organizational way what a new school might look like. So everybody had a little fun, and you can see these 4 or 5 pictures here. We have incriminating video, too, if you want to see that, where people, yes, they were trying to explain their way out of some of this. And so, All right, so then, kind of it is to help us move then to the bottom of the funnel to get to students specifically, then we started asking, what is it that makes a successful student? Okay? Remember, the whole idea is all of these things, like if you go all the way to the bottom of that list, and number 3 from the bottom says seeker. Okay? Well, by Christy being there as your architect, she's hearing people explain what seeker means. And so that concept can be then translated into the new facilities, the renovated facilities. Okay? What will staff be doing? This one is always fun because I hear such fun, different things. You know, teachers are working on their computer, or they're cruise directors in this case. Always on. Okay? What will students be doing? And just as a side note, I've heard this one kind of evolves into they'll be at the mall. I had one group say they'll be at the mall. Well, what does that mean? Well, if you think about how a shopping mall is laid out, there are magnets at each end, and there are services along a spine, food, you know, restrooms, etc. Not a bad concept for a school. Okay? All right. All right, and in closing, I think this is the last one, the last page. What we did then is we had Christy go through and show a number of pictures of buildings that they had done. I also brought pictures of schools that had been funded from OFCC, and we just had kind of some time to talk and say, okay, you know, I kind of like this part. I like the flexible learning environments, and so we just kind of closed up with that. Okay. All right. So thank you. If I'd be happy to ask or answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chuck. The other thing, comment that I would make, and we're about to move into another phase here, the early stages of developing these concepts around our additions and our new pre-K1 building. And an added challenge that we have, and Chuck says the space should say yes, our space that we create has to say yes in a number of ways beyond what we're going to be using them for initially. When you think about the high school and the additions that we're making at the high school, that has to say yes to the high school kids and their needs and the staff needs, but it also needs to say yes when that school site becomes 6, 7, 8 middle school. When we look at the additions at our junior high, it has to say yes to a 6, 8 middle school, but it also has to say yes to when that becomes more of an elementary building as opposed to a middle school. So that's a challenge that we have in trying to create space that meets current needs as well as future needs. This was a great experience. I'm really very appreciative of the staff, the teachers and the administrators that took 3 days out of the building. There's going to be another 3 days that we're going to take out of the building as we get into the early stages of this concept, developing these concepts and moving through this process. So it's really pretty exciting. We don't often get the opportunity once in a career to build spaces and to create new learning pieces. Since I've been here, this will be the second opportunity that we've had since I came here in 2004. So it's a pretty exciting time. Thanks, and that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Questions? All right, thank you very much. This time, community comments on agenda items.
No one has signed up.
Thank you very much. Okay, at this time, we entertain the treasurer's reports and financial. Rhonda?
Is that for the board's approval of the monthly, month ending November financial reports?
Mr. Kamin's? Mr. Siebert already seconded. All right. Jerry, do you want to cover anything on that?
Yeah, the reports include the bank reconciliation, and a financial summary of each individual fund, beginning balance, ending balance, and also receipts and disbursements so far throughout the year. And then two different budget reports for the general fund, and then also a revenue report for the general fund.
No questions, roll call please.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Mr. Nay? Mr. Remains?
Yes.
Next, under item 2, contracts, ask for the board's approval of the contracts that are listed.
Mr. Nay?
Second.
Mr. Gates? Questions or comments? Okay, if you'd like, thank you very much.
Yeah, 2 contracts on there. The first one is with Bradley Payne Advisors. Both these contracts have to do with our bond issue, of course. The first one with Bradley Payne Advisors, and they are hired on as our municipal advisor. They are experts on financing for municipalities and so on, and they have the nice thing is they have a fiduciary responsibility to the school district, which bond underwriters and stuff do not, that they have to work on our behalf, make sure we're getting the best deal. And typically, from the research I've done, you can usually see a 5 to 7 basis point drop in pricing. It's all about pricing when you set the bonds on the market. And then also the structure of the bonds also should work on with me to get them structured right to make the most sense when you're going out 37 years and have a structure with the necessary millage to pay them off. And then the second contract is with Emerging Design Architectural Design Services. It's for architectural services, plus they also have consultants within that contract for mechanical, electrical engineers, you name it. That's underneath your structural engineers also.
I do have a question. It's under the emergent contract here. It says here early elementary school, intermediate, junior high, and high school. As far as Salem renovations or anything, I think you've done some work on it. Will that be billed T&M?
We need to figure out what the scope is gonna be first.
Okay, that's not in this.
It is not, it's listed in the contract recognizing it, but saying that the fee will be figured out once we know the scope of the work we're gonna say it is.
Do we have not to exceed T&M?
It'll be an amendment to this contract.
so
My
it'll be
guess
amended.
is it will be a fixed fee if per firm,
Okay.
the scope is, so it'll probably be a fixed fee.
Yeah, I know who. Okay, thank you, thank you. Any other questions?
Okay, we'll call Mr. Haas,
Yes.
Mr. Nay,
Yes.
Mr. Cremines,
Yes.
Mr. Siebert.
Yes.
Next, under item 3, ask for board's approval of resolution 18015, accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Warren County Budget Commission.
Mr. Siebert? Mr. Cremines, second. Questions?
This one go real quick.
Okay, great.
We actually established, we accepted rates actually this past March, because normally when you accept rates, tax rates, after our tax book is put together, the county had their reappraisal this year, and we came in a lot higher than what they were thinking. So we're actually reducing some rates on our emergency operating levy and also our bond levy. The emergency operating levy is going from 12.7 mils down to 12, which is a 0.7 mil reduction, and then the bonds are going down from 5.4 down to 4.8 mils. So we're seeing a reduction of 1.3 mils just between those two things, and on a $200,000 house, it's about $90 a year at this point. So I'm happy to see millage go down and reduce the cost effort.
And the village went down because the valuations went up?
Yes, our valuation is projected for 18 to be a little over $1 million, and we were just under 900 million prior to the first truck.
I'm sure we're gonna put that out there. That's all right. Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Nay? Mr. Cremines?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Okay, at this time, we entertain a questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Cremins?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Mr. Nay?
Thank you. I'd like to ask the board's approval for the approval of the updated employee handbook.
So moved.
Mr. Cremins?
I'll second.
Mr. Nay? Roll call, please.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Mr. Nay?
Yes.
Mr. Cremins?
Yes.
I ask the board's approval for number 3, the school resource officer,
Mr. Nay?
I'll second.
Mr. Cremins? Questions?
This would be the addition of a second SRO who is projected to work out of the intermediate school office and serve and support our elementary schools as well as the
And
is projected on the January after people out of this building. They'll start this transition after the first of the year with our SRO.
I did have one question, Mr. Power, on 4A, agreement 4A, talks about the normal hourly rate of pay, so on and so forth. Do we know what that's going to be, or how it's going to sit?
Typically, that fits, they're paid on hourly rate.
Right.
And that fits.
I just
where-
didn't see a number there.
Well, I think the projection was annual cost about $40,000 a year. I think the officer that's coming on board has 10 years' experience. And so we're only typically paying the salary for the days that we use them. We're not paying for a 260 contract. We're paying for 185 days or 177 days. And that's what we would bill based on where they are on their salary schedule.
And also on the vehicle, I know,
Right.
I was just curious because I didn't see any in the numbers per se. Terry, did you have those in your budget?
Projected,
Yes, that additional SRO, we projected about 85, I believe, overall in the budget. Roughly mid to low 40s for the resource officer, and then 40, but I believe we'll go into a lease on the car, which I think we only make payments each year.
Right.
So we don't have as much cash flow out there.
Okay.
so the projected cost of the car was, I think, initial 30 and about another 10 to equipment. So they make a lease payment on that, carry it for 4 years, and then usually they turn it over.
All right. All right. Starts in January.
He'll do some transitioning.
Right.
And he has to, he was a community resource officer, the gentleman that's going to be the new SRO here. He's currently in the Hanover Township Department, he has a patrol office. But he was a community resource officer over in Dane Township for about 10 years, 8 years. So he has a lot of experience working with elementary school staffs and younger students.
Very much. Okay. No other questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Mr. Nay? Mr. Cremins?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, at this time, new business, the first reading of the updated board policies. We'll let you all get up to speed on that. Mr. Cremins, do we have any Warren County Person report? Ms. Rice to come back. The next board meeting date is December the 11th here at the intermediate school. Are we going to be in the media center? It says media center on here.
We'll probably be out.
All right. Are there any community comments on non-agenda items?
No one has signed up.
Thank you very much. Ms. Williams. Okay, that is all. We need a motion for adjournment. Mr. Cremins? Mr. Nay? Roll call, please.
Mr. Nay?
Yes.
Mr. Cremins?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Thank you.